Book of Matthew, chapter 4, verses 18 through 22. As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. "Come, follow me," Jesus said. "I will make you fishers of men." At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him.
Thanks, Eric. Well, good morning again. One thing you'll learn about me is that I like to have good definitions on things. Unfortunately, I'm not so good about that in the home all the time in communication. I don't know about you, if you've ever had a time of communication or discussion, some may call it an argument with your spouse, where you find out after a while that you've actually been talking about the exact same thing. And you're arguing two different sides, and then you're like, wait, we're both talking about the exact same thing. What are we even talking about? We both agree on this subject. But then by that point, you're really mad at each other, and so you can't just come to that agreement. Or you've been spending an hour thinking you're talking about the exact same thing, where in fact you're actually both talking about two completely separate things. Because communication's not easy. And so I find that sometimes when we talk about terms and we talk about like concepts that we think that we're all on the same page, and then we find out that we're not. So let's talk about some of these things. The one that we want to spend a few weeks talking about is a disciple. And what is a disciple, or what is a Christian? See, over time, the word Christian has a lot of different connotations depending where you are. I was talking to my daughter about it this week, how there was a movie years ago, and I remember as a kid, I was like 10 or 11 when this movie came out, and I'm watching it, and this guy is spending the entire movie calling another person who's not his name, he is calling him Christian. I'm like, why is he calling him Christian? He's not a Christian. But why is he calling him that? Well, he was because he was from England at the time, in the medieval times. And so because he was in England, he must be a Christian. And so that's just what he called him the entire time. But that didn't mean he was a Christian. Well, and then you have people still today. We had recently, within the last 30 years, a war was fought in the country between Muslims and Christians. And you could argue neither side were Muslim or Christian. That's just what they associated with. And so you have cultural and political implications for what is a Christian. And even now you go around society and ask people, just in general, what is a Christian? And you're going to hear different definitions, ranging anywhere from, they are people who go to church on Sunday, they believe in God. Probably the basic definition is that they've accepted Jesus as their Savior. And something I find fascinating is that up until recently, every U.S. president has gone to church and claimed to be a Christian. And it's only recent that hasn't been a thing, and that it hasn't been a big deal in public society. And even now, if you watch the trends and the statistics, this is the first time in our country's history where it's actually starting to not be cool to call yourself a Christian. And so we live in this world where we're like, okay, well, now we aren't labeling ourselves as this as much. So what does it mean then to be a Christian? And I think actually Jim preached on this a few months ago, if I remember right, at least this passage. And so in Acts then, we find in Acts 11:26, who were first called Christians and what it meant to be a Christian. And it says this, it says that the disciples were first called Christians at Antioch. And so this small to us Syrian town called Antioch, disciples were first called Christians. And so we then have the word that the first time it's being used and what they were being called. And for us today, it's not this way, but Christian then, it was a term of mockery. They were these little Christs, and they were all associated with this person named Christ. And so these people who are disciples of Jesus, we're just going to mock them and call them little Christs. And so that's where the term started. And it was over the last 2,000 years then, what the people that were associated as disciples started becoming Christians. And then those two words have since split apart in their meaning. So to understand what a Christian is, we have to understand what a disciple is. And so again, we're working through some terms. And what's interesting then is over these last 2,000 years, how we've redefined within the church, accidentally, honestly, what it means to be a disciple. Because now we go around and we spread the gospel. Why? So that people will become Christians. And so we want people to become Christians and come into be a part of us and to grow God's kingdom. But then we've taken the word disciple, and what does it mean to be a disciple? And anymore you talk about disciple within churches, and mostly it's like, well, we're all Christians, but there's this subset of super Christians who really want to be with, and grow in their faith. And so they're called disciples. And so they go through a discipleship pathway. And we build programs to build disciples. And so disciple is something different than just being a Christian. But Acts 11 tells us that disciples are Christians. And so the question is then, for us, what does it mean to be a disciple? So a disciple, again, it's not a term that we use very often in our society today. But it was a term that was used a lot during Jesus' time. So when the question is, what is a disciple? We got to first start with the culture around Jesus and what he was talking about during that time period when he was starting to call his disciples. And then his disciples then would be called Christians. So a disciple comes from the Greek word mathetes. And I'm not going to have it up there spelled for you. Just accept that math does come in later in life. And we do use math then in church. So for those of you that never liked math, I'm sorry. If you're a disciple of Jesus, you're technically using math every day. So what that word simply means is learner. So anyone who's a learner then is a disciple, it kind of took on some different connotations. So it was more than just somebody who would sit down and learn something. It was an incredibly intentional word, that the process that they would then go through. And they had been going through it for hundreds of years before Jesus came. And it was especially important in Greek culture. You see, a disciple would be somebody who was taught by a teacher, and they would be taught everything that the teacher knew. How the teacher thought, how the teacher walked through, made decisions. Everything that he had in his brain would be taught to the disciple, with the goal then for that disciple to eventually, with the same method that he was taught and in the same way, be able to teach other people that someday. So that you would have this entire chain coming down through the time, hopefully, of everybody thinking just like the teacher did. And so some things that happen with this disciple-teacher relationship by the time we get to the first century. So the first thing, the characteristic of a disciple, is that a disciple would leave his home and move in with the teacher. So he would leave his parents, he would move in, it could be a young age, it generally wasn't going to be somebody older, but they would move in with the teacher. Why? So that they could learn and study and see exactly how the teacher would go about his life and doing things. The second characteristic of a disciple was that the disciple served the teacher, and that within that home, the teacher was the absolute authority now. So the disciple would give up his prior life and would serve the master. So I want to study under somebody, I would go, I would live with them, I would serve them, and that would be that relationship. It's not something that we see today. I don't know how many teachers we have out here, but could you imagine your students moving in with you? And can you imagine within your schools you being the absolute authority that you're supposed to be? Like, parents, can you imagine within your homes that your teenagers would think that you're the absolute authority in your home? I mean, it's a different world. So the third thing is that the disciple not only learned all that the teacher knew, he also became like him in character. So it's not just about this head knowledge, and it's not just about going down and learning multiplication tables. It was also learning about how the teacher went about life and what were the characteristics of the teacher and who was he like and how did he do things and why did he do things and why would he treat that person that way and why would he treat that person this way. And so they were learning to adopt all that the teacher was. And that the fourth thing was that the disciple chose the teacher, and then the teacher would accept them. So you would go up to the teacher and say, I want to be your disciple. And the teacher had the ability to say yes or no to you. But the teachers didn't really call the disciples to them. That was only really radical teachers that would do that. And that just wasn't a thing that happened because teachers were above that. Teachers didn't need to call people to them. They were supposed to be so amazing that people would just see them and want to be a part of what they were doing. And so those were the characteristics that when Jesus comes around in the turn of the millennia, that Jesus is walking into and Jesus is talking. And as Jesus starts walking around on the earth and he starts having disciples, these are the characteristics that people are going to expect from them. And so Jesus is then going to call disciples. And so if that was what disciples looked like in the first century world, our question is then, how did Jesus handle disciples? And what's interesting is that Jesus does give us a definition of what he deems a disciple to be. And we find that in Matthew chapter 4. So on your outlines, we're going to be moving through quite a few passages of Scripture today. And I've given all of the passages on there that we'll be doing. And again, like I've said before, if you use the Bibles that we have here at the church, the page numbers will be on them to help you out find them. But we're going to be starting in Matthew chapter 4. So it was the scripture that Eric read for us earlier. And it's Jesus, having began to preach and having began to teach the people of Israel, he now goes to choose disciples. And so we see in verse 18, as Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting nets into the lake, for they were fishermen. So Jesus is watching these two fishermen. He knows who they are. What we're not told Matthew is, but we're told elsewhere, is that he does actually have an existing relationship with these guys. And so Jesus walks up to them, and he says, "Come follow me, and I will send you out to fish for people." Now, I actually like the way the ESV translates this passage a little bit better. The ESV has it this way. He tells them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And in that one sentence, Jesus has defined for him what a disciple looks like. And we already see how he's taking what is for a first century, how they did disciples, and he's already turning it a little bit. Because Jesus didn't wait around for people to come to him and start following him. He called them. And remember what I said, teachers were above that. They didn't do that. Well, Jesus is above them. And Jesus does something that he wants to then mark out for all of his future disciples. He calls them into being in a discipling relationship with him. That Jesus didn't wait around for them to find him. He went directly to them. And he breaks down discipleship into three different things. He tells them, "Follow me." He tells them, what I want you to do is to follow me, to come after me. And he tells them, I will make you then. If you follow me, I'm going to make you into something. And he tells them, what is that? Fishers of men. And so we're going to spend the next few weeks figuring out what is it that Jesus meant as he broke those down. And we're going to look at them in depth over the next few weeks. But today, I just want to go over with you, what does it mean to be a disciple? When we say that we're Christians, we say that we're disciples, what is it that we're meaning? And in these three phrases, it breaks it down for us. The first phrase is follow me. See, what we said earlier is that the disciples would leave their homes and move in with their masters. Well, the thing is, Jesus didn't have a home. Jesus wandered and he talked so he was actually asking the disciples then to come with him, where he didn't necessarily have a home, didn't know where he was going to lay his head every night, but he was asking them to come with him. And to follow him means that you are changing the direction of your life. Now, when we say that, it doesn't mean that you stop being who you are. It doesn't mean that you stop in your career and that you stop doing that. That's not the call of Jesus. See, these guys didn't stop being fishermen, and you'll read more stories throughout the Gospels where they're still spending time fishing. They still knew how to fish. It didn't stop for them. But he told them and called them to follow him. And what that means is it's a reprioritizing of your life, of the things of your life. If you're a husband, you don't stop loving your wife because Jesus called you. In fact, what it means is that it just shifts who the most important people are in your life. That all of a sudden, you're not the most important person in your life. To follow Jesus means that now you're asking him, Jesus, what do you think I should do? God, how should I go about doing this? You don't stop what you're doing. You don't stop working. You don't stop being married. You don't stop being a parent. You don't give up everything, but you reprioritize it. And often we think that following Jesus means that we just make this head notion of, yes, Jesus, I want to be yours, and I'm not going to change anything about myself. But it has to. It has to redirect your life. It has to shift. And for some of you, you may think, well, I've been following Jesus for so long, I don't know. I've been going down this direction. So how did it change? Well, if you have, and you think, I don't know what my testimony is because I didn't give up drugs, I didn't give up this life, and I don't know what that means, and I just don't have this amazing testimony. You do, in the fact that you know if you look back on it, and you can play the what if game. What would your life look like if you weren't following Jesus? And it should be different than if you had never chosen him versus you have chosen him. Your life should look different. And if you can say, sitting here today, that your life isn't any different than what it would have been, that's when you have to ask the question, what am I doing following Jesus? So Jesus lays out a couple things for us. First, in John 12, what it looks like to follow him. He says, anyone who loves their life will lose it, while anyone who hates their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. Whoever serves me must follow me, and where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. See, Jesus is talking about, it's not that you have to hate life in the fact of, oh, this is miserable. It's a reprioritizing. What's more important? And for so many of us, what's most important is us and what we want. And that's our priority. And Jesus is saying, no, if you're going to follow me, I'm what's most important. He puts it best, I think, in Luke 9:23 and 24. Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will save it. Following Jesus is a choice, literally to die to yourself and say, I'm not it. Jesus is it. I want to follow him. It's the changing of the direction of your life. It's to make that decision and that commitment. I'm no longer going this way. I'm going to go this way. And it's that commitment that is a super important choice. And it's the one that is so incredibly difficult for us to make. I've heard stories recently, quite a few of them, of people who have been talking to others, and these people know exactly what they're like, oh yeah, this is the gospel, and I'm following along with all this, and I see it. Well, are you ready to give your life? No. Well, why not? They can't really give good reasons. But it's because it's such an impossibly difficult choice for us to choose not to live for ourselves anymore, but to live for Jesus and to give our hearts over to him and turn from who we are. But that's what he's calling us to do. So the first thing that a disciple is it's someone who is following Jesus. The second thing he says is, I will make you. So what he's saying here is a disciple is someone who's following Jesus and being changed to be more like Jesus. So we often get this idea too, that being a disciple, being a Christian means, okay, I'm following Jesus, I'm saying that, okay, well, what's going to change about you? Nothing, because I don't need to change anything about me, because I like the way I am. See how that just doesn't go together? You can't really say that you're going to follow Jesus and change the direction of your life if you're not also going to be changed by him. Because to change the direction of your life, to follow a different path, is to change. But, and I think we've done this accidentally over the years, and as we present gospel, that the gospel that we present people isn't one where you have to change. And essentially what it means is that following, it becomes cheap. But change is difficult and change is hard because none of us actually want to. We may hit rock bottom where we want to change and we don't want to be where we're at. But do we want to change to become more like Jesus? Or do we want to change to be more positive in our lives? Well, if I'm going to change, then I want that promotion at work. Or if I'm going to change, then my spouse better change. Or if I'm going to change, then my children better. Or if I'm going to change, then my relationships or my money situation better change with me. But Jesus doesn't say that. He says, I will make. So he's talking to us about a change that's going to happen, and that these fishermen that he called, I honestly don't think they fully understood at that point when they were being called by Jesus to change their pattern of their life and to follow him, that they had any idea where they would go in their lives. But they changed. In Acts 4, talking about Peter and John, and there were people that were around them, they say this: when they saw the courage of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men. So Peter and John were fishermen. They weren't supposed to be these guys that would stand up and be the most courageous people. They weren't supposed to be the most well-spoken. They weren't supposed to act the way that they did. But when these people saw them, that they were ordinary men, they were astonished, and they took note that these men had what? Been with Jesus. That being with Jesus and following Jesus and being close to Jesus changed who they were. That these guys as disciples, they weren't the same that they were 5 years ago. That they were completely different men now. Why? Because they had been changed by Jesus. To follow Jesus, you can't be the same. And it says in Romans 12, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That once again, it's about changing. It's about not looking like the rest of society. I find it fascinating that, again, today, and I don't think it's just unique to our culture, but we feel it right now because we're the ones living in it, that essentially what everybody's telling us is make your Christianity, make your religion, make your discipleship more like society, because society, look at where society's moving and look how wonderful this is, and we've got these things as society, so become like us. And so you hear people speaking and talking and they're like, well, Jesus is more like this, he's not like that. And where are they getting it from? Because that's what society does. And yet the Bible tells us that we're supposed to be changed into what? Not like the world, but like Jesus. And so we don't let society tell us who Jesus is. We let the Bible tell us who Jesus is. And we change to be more like him, even if that's uncomfortable to us. And the changing that happens, it's not like how we would design it. Like, I'll be honest, if I was to make this model up, I wouldn't do it the way God's designed it for us. Because I would have the change be instantaneous. That as soon as you chose to follow Jesus, boom, changed. Everything about you is the way that you're supposed to be. Why? Because that makes sense. It would be easier for us, and then we couldn't get it wrong. But God didn't design it that way. The change starts, and for a lot of people, there is an instantaneous change, and it could be just in one aspect of your life. But then we go through our lives changing, or at least we're supposed to. And for a lot of us, we get stuck going, am I more like Jesus today than I was 20 years ago? And we think again of this as this like ability to level up, like we're playing a video game or something, or that As our bodies change, that's us changing. And so as we get older, we just naturally mature into being this different believer who's closer to Jesus. And the truth is, that's not how it works. We're supposed to not be conforming. We're supposed to be changing into being more like Jesus, but we have to stay close to him and grow with him. And if you wonder what that looks like, well, there was a disciple who was following Jesus that never got changed. And he ended up selling Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver. Like, not everybody who says that they were following him actually followed him, because he was never changed. And then the third thing, Jesus says that he will make them fishers of men. So this is saying that a disciple is someone who is following Jesus, being changed by Jesus, and is committed to the mission of Jesus. I think it's interesting that Jesus used the term, fishers of men. He was talking to fishermen. And I don't know if when he called Matthew, who was a tax collector, if he said to him, follow me and I will make you a collector of people's debts. I don't think he said it like that. I do think there was a reason why he said fishermen, talking to fishermen. But I also think it's because of just the nature of it and the imagery that's used there. Okay, I will admit, I'm not much of an outdoorsman. Like I said, I don't know much about fishing, but I know some of you do, so I'm not going to really get into the weeds and then be humiliated by you afterwards. But, I don't know, when was the last time you were walking by a lake or a pond with a net held out and a fish jumped in? Has that happened to anybody? If so, tell me your story afterwards. That'd be funny. But it doesn't happen. You have to prepare. You have to cast a net. You have to throw in a line. You have to use a stick of dynamite. However it is that you go fishing, you have to make an effort to catch the fish. And Jesus is saying, I will make you into fishers of men. Which means that there's a seeking, there's an intentionality, there's a preparation involved in that. And that Jesus has a mission. And again, when we look at being a disciple or we look at being a follower of Jesus, often we stop at one of these points. And we think, well, I'm going to follow Jesus because I made that decision, but I'm not going to change, which makes no sense. We already talked about that. Or I'm going to follow Jesus and I'm going to grow closer to him because I'm going to gain knowledge and I want to be changed by him and I want to look, and I want to grow closer to him. But I'm not actually going to get on his mission. And his mission is to make them fishers of men. He is saying, if you're going to be my disciple, you're going to be on mission with me. And he says it clearly in Luke 19:10. The Son of Man came to do what? Came to seek and save the lost. It's why he came. And that's why he was calling his disciples. He called these disciples to follow him and to be with him. And while they were with him, they would be changed by him. And they would learn his ways. They would learn to teach how he taught. And they would learn his teachings. They would learn who it is that God is. And they would grow closer to him because they spent time with him. And he spent particular time pouring into them. And he didn't have just 12 disciples. He had many disciples that would follow him. And the things that those people went through, there was a lot of stuff they went through, and not all of them stayed with him because some of them just followed him for a time and then fell away and said, nope, this isn't what I signed up for. See, Jesus didn't just go around to teach people good stuff. Jesus went around trying to bring people into this community and try to show them this is what the kingdom of heaven's like. This is what my mission is on this earth. And this isn't just about us, and this isn't just about what we're doing. This is to bring other people into this group as well. Again, we said that a first century disciple was someone who was taught to be like their teacher, like their master, and then to go and teach others. And Jesus is saying the same thing, but it's not just about the teaching. It's about the seeking and the saving. That Jesus was great at turning ideas that people had upside down on their heads. And this is what Jesus wanted. His last words to his disciples before he left the earth for good were these: "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations." Hear that, what he wanted his disciples to do. It wasn't, you know what, curl up, think about the good things that I've taught you, and, just reminisce. It was what? Go and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. See, Jesus' mission was to make disciples who would make disciples who would make disciples. And so that's what he set about to do. It's why he came. One of the reasons, we get the idea too that Jesus just came to die for us. Well, okay, then why didn't he die at 18? Why did he live until he was in his 30s if he only came to die? Because he had a mission to do in that. And his mission was choosing these men to be his disciples and then to teach them exactly who he was, to teach them to be like him so that they then too could seek out people to follow Jesus. See, they weren't supposed to make disciples of themselves. They were supposed to make disciples of Jesus. And so when we're sitting here today or standing here as I am, we're not in here to just learn. We're not in here just to gather together to learn some fun concepts, to hang out together, to spend time, to worship. And those are things that we can do. But we're here because we want to be disciples of Jesus. And there are people who walk in these doors who aren't disciples of his yet. And so what is our goal? That they would become disciples of his. People who follow Jesus, who are being changed by Jesus, and who then are doing his mission. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. You see, Jesus' mission is our mission. This is what we're supposed to be about doing. And so when we say that we're Christians or we say that we're disciples, this is what it is. We are followers of Jesus, being changed by Jesus, committed to his mission. And this is what we want to be about doing. And so that's what a church is. A church is made up of individuals who then group together, who are all following Jesus, being changed by Jesus, and we're all committed to the mission of Jesus. And unfortunately what happens is sometimes we like to follow Jesus and we never get to the mission of Jesus. And that's for these super subset of Christians to do. If you're an evangelist, well then you can be, committed to the, mission of Jesus. But I'm not. I'm just a follower. It doesn't work. Or, well, I want to be changed, and so, help me, and let's go through this discipleship class together so I can be changed. But I still want to hold on to these things for my life. It doesn't work that way. Well, I don't really want to grow up in my faith. I just want to follow Jesus, and so I just want... No, you can't. We're disciples. This is what we do. We follow him, we're changed by him, and we're committed to his mission. You can't do 2 out of 3. If you say that you are a disciple of Jesus, and you're like, well, I never used that term before. If you say that you're a Christian, this is what you are. Well, nobody ever explained that to me before. I am now. And it's in there. It's not a secret sauce. It's not anything that's really new. It's who Jesus was calling us to be. And so the questions we have to wrestle with is, who are we? And some of us are committed and we want to grow. And oftentimes we just don't know how. And so that's what we figure out together. And that's what we do as a church then, is to help you grow. And that's our mission. And if you're wanting to, we're going to be talking about that over the next few weeks. Like I said, we're going to break this down into each of the individual pieces. And we're going to talk about each of them and what they mean in depth. What does it really mean to be a follower versus a book out there that says, or just a fan of Jesus? And then what does it really mean that Jesus will make us? And how do we really grow and change? And what does that look like? Because it should be a lot simpler, but we just like to mess everything up. And then what does it mean to be committed to his mission? Like, what does it really mean on that? Does that mean I have to walk down the streets and go banging door to door? Okay, spoiler alert, I don't think that. It's not what that means. But what does all of that mean? And that's what we're going to be discussing. And so when I stand up here and I'm calling you to commit your life to Jesus, this is what I'm asking you to commit your life to doing. To being a follower who is being changed and is committed to the mission of Jesus. And imagine a world where we're like that. Where we're all following and being changed and growing together, and what this world looks like. And we're all committed to the mission of Jesus and affecting those around us. And imagine what this world looks like in that. It's a pretty cool place. Like, let your mind go down what that could look like. Let your mind go with what the Myersdale area could look like if 100 people decided to just be all in like this, and what that could mean for this area. It doesn't mean economic development. It might mean a Chick-fil-A moves in, because that is God's restaurant. I mean, we can all hope for that, right? But it can mean an area changed. It can mean people growing closer to Jesus. And it can mean a community that's changed, and then a county that's changed, and then a state that's changed. All because people committed to being his disciples. And so that's what I want us to wrestle with over the next few weeks. What does this look like? We're given a unique opportunity. Easter's coming around the corner. Fast, depending on how you're looking at it. It's an opportunity that we get to talk about this stuff, and people don't just think we're weird for talking about it. And so if that's one of your barriers, this is a great opportunity to talk about it. Easter's an awesome chance to invite people in and invite them into a conversation with you. Then right after Easter, moms, you are given an awesome opportunity to invite your family, if they're not coming to church, to come to church and ask them to hang out with you for the day and spend time with you. Like, we are given these opportunities over and over again. Vacation Bible School is coming up soon. That's an awesome opportunity for us. We have the Maple Festival, which is another awesome opportunity for us. Just all these opportunities. Our community gives us great times and chances to show them that we are disciples of Jesus. And so let's take advantage of those. And let's take advantage of them and show them who Jesus is. We just got done talking about Jonah and grace and how we can show grace. We've got awesome opportunities to show grace to our community. And so let's do that. So be thinking over this week and praying this week. What are opportunities that we have? And be praying, and as you are, God, how am I following you? What's changed in my life that I say I follow you? What would my life look like if I weren't following you? And then, God, how do I need to change to be more like you? What is it about me? And if you're wondering then how God's responding, and you're wondering, how can I be changed? Not only are we going to be talking about it, but come ask me. And we can talk about this and what we can do. Don't wait until the sermon before you start wrestling through it. Do it before that. And then ask yourself the question, am I really actually committed to the mission of Jesus? That's an incredibly difficult question. And for some of you, you are, and I've heard your stories. Man, are they awesome stories. And it's so cool. But am I committed to the mission of Jesus? Let's pray. Lord, thank you for bringing us here today. Thank you for the example that you set before us about how to disciple people and what a disciple is, and who it is that you're calling and what you want from us. Lord, may we be people who are following you, being changed by you and committed to your mission. God, as we wrestle through these concepts over the next few weeks, Lord, open our hearts to you, to your direction, and what you want us to be and who you want us to be. And then, God, show us how you want us to go about doing it. God, thank you for these people. Thank you for their hearts. Thank you for their love for you, Lord. And be with us as we go out this week, go out on our mission that you've set us on. In your name, amen.